When a presence older than the Force itself descended upon the galaxy, every Jedi felt the tremor in their bones, and every Sith Lord tasted fear for the first time in centuries. On Mortis, where reality bends and the Ancient Ones once walked, something arrived that neither lightsaber nor lightning could touch. A being that saw the Force not as everything, but as merely one truth among infinite others. Grand Master Yaddle journeyed alone to confront this impossible entity, while across 1,000 worlds, Force cults splintered, temples emptied, and the most sacred belief in the galaxy began to crack. If the Force is not ultimate, if balance itself can be questioned by something beyond it, then what happens to those who have built their entire existence on its foundations? The stars above Mortis shattered without sound. No explosion marked the moment. No scream tore through the void. The fracture was silent, profound, a crack in the architecture of existence itself that only those who listened to the Force's deepest currents could perceive. On 1,000 worlds, Jedi Masters stirred from meditation, their hearts seized by a tremor that had no name. In hidden temples, Sith Lords clutched their chests as if stabbed, feeling something vast and incomprehensible brush against the edges of their awareness. The Force itself seemed to pause, to inhale sharply, as though recognizing the presence of something it had never known before. Above the celestial realm where the Father had once maintained the balance between his children of light and dark, where the ones had embodied the living architecture of the Force, a figure materialized. It was not born into the galaxy. It did not arrive. It simply was, and had always been, though the galaxy was only now becoming aware of its presence. The one above all stood in the void where reality bent and time folded upon itself, a presence so vast that to perceive it was to risk madness, yet so gentle that stars continued their dance, undisturbed. The being observed. It did not judge. It did not interfere. It simply witnessed the galaxy spread before it like a living tapestry, trillions of threads of light and darkness woven into patterns of choice and consequence. The Force flowed through this tapestry, binding it together, but the one above all saw deeper. It saw the Force itself as one thread among infinite others, a magnificent expression of existence, yet not the totality of it. This realization, wordless and absolute, rippled outward from Mortis like a stone cast into still water. On Coruscant, in the highest spire of the Jedi Temple, Grand Master Yaddle ceased her meditation. Her ancient eyes opened, reflecting starlight from the city world beyond her window. 8 centuries of life had taught her to recognize disturbances in the Force, but this was no disturbance. It was a silence, a question mark written in the fabric of reality itself. She rose slowly, her diminutive form casting a long shadow across the Presser's meditation chamber. Around her, the temple hummed with unease. Padawans woke from troubled sleep. Knights abandoned their training. Masters gathered in hushed circles, speaking in whispers of a presence that defied description. Yaddle walked the temple's ancient corridors alone, her footsteps echoing against stone that had witnessed 10,000 years of Jedi history. She passed the archives, where Jocasta Nu stood frozen before a hollow projection of the galaxy, watching as entire sectors flickered with reports of mass Force sensitives experiencing simultaneous visions. She passed the council chamber, where Mace Windu and Ki-Adi-Mundi debated the nature of the anomaly, their voices tight with controlled fear. She descended to the lowest levels, to the chamber where the oldest holocrons whispered of prophecies and beings that existed beyond conventional understanding. The holocron of Arca Jeth manifested before her, its blue light wavering as though struggling to maintain cohesion. The ancient Jedi Master's recorded consciousness spoke, its voice distorted. Grand Master, the balance is not broken, but questioned. Something exists beyond the Force's duality. The ones of Mortis are silent. You must go. You alone carry the wisdom of centuries without the arrogance of certainty. Yaddle closed her eyes. She had served the Order faithfully, had witnessed the rise and fall of Sith Lords, had trained generations of Jedi in the ways of compassion and restraint. She understood the Force as few others did, not as a tool to be wielded, but as a living current to be honored. If this presence beyond Mortis represented a threat to the balance, she would face it. If it represented an opportunity for understanding, she would embrace it. Either way, the Force had chosen her for this moment, and she would not refuse its call. Within hours, Yaddle departed Coruscant aboard a small, unmarked vessel. She told no one of her destination, left no instructions for her absence. The Council would understand or it would not. Either way, her path was clear. As her ship entered hyperspace, the blue-white tunnel of accelerated space seemed dimmer than usual, as though the light itself was uncertain of its direction. The journey to Mortis was not measured in distance but in attunement. The realm existed outside normal space, accessible only to those whom the Force permitted to find it. Yaddle meditated during the journey, opening herself to the currents that would guide her ship. She felt the presence growing stronger, not as a threat but as an overwhelming fact, like standing before an ocean and recognizing the futility of comprehension. This being, whatever it was, existed on a scale that made even the Ancient Ones seem small. Her ship emerged from hyperspace near a nexus of conflicting gravities where Mortis shimmered in and out of phase with real space. The celestial realm appeared before her viewscreen as a planet-sized monastery adrift in the void. Its architecture impossible, its existence a defiance of natural law. Yaddle guided her vessel through the reality storm that surrounded Mortis, feeling her ship shudder as it transitioned from the material galaxy into a space where thought and matter were not entirely distinct. She landed on a platform of crystallized starlight that should not have been solid yet bore her ship's weight without difficulty. As she descended the boarding ramp, Yaddle felt the temperature of existence itself shift. The air, if it could be called air, hummed with potential. Above her, the sky was not black but translucent, revealing layers of reality stacked like transparent steel sheets, each one containing a different version of what could be. The one above all stood at the center of an ancient plaza where the father had once mediated between his children. To perceive the being was to experience a form of conceptual vertigo. It appeared simultaneously as a figure of blinding light, an absence of darkness, and a presence so mundane it might have been a simple traveler. Yaddle's Jedi training allowed her to stabilize her perception, to see the being as her mind could process it, a robed figure whose face was both infinitely kind and utterly unknowable. Grandmaster, the one above all, spoke, and its voice was not sound but understanding arriving directly in her mind. You come seeking answers to questions you have not yet asked. Yaddle bowed, not in submission but in recognition of something greater than herself. I come because the Force itself trembles at your presence. Are you a god? The being's expression, insofar as it had one, conveyed something like gentle amusement. I am what exists when all stories are told and all possibilities exhausted. Your Force is magnificent, a living expression of connection and duality. But it is not the only such expression. There are infinite universes, infinite ways that existence manifests. I observe them all. Yaddle felt the weight of those words settle over her like a shroud. Then you stand outside the Force. You exist beyond it. Beyond, within, beside. These prepositions fail. The Force is real, Grandmaster. It binds your galaxy together, gives meaning to light and darkness, provides structure to choice and consequence. But it is not ultimate. It is a local phenomenon, beautiful and complex, but local nonetheless. The plaza beneath Yaddle's feet began to shift, the crystallized starlight becoming transparent. Below, she saw the galaxy spread out like a living map, billions of stars connected by threads of Force energy. She saw Jedi and Sith locked in their eternal dance, saw smugglers and soldiers and slaves all contributing to the vast tapestry of existence. And she saw, with the clarity the one above all provided, that the Force which bound this galaxy was not present in the infinite darkness beyond it. You speak heresy, Yaddle said quietly, without anger. The Jedi believe the Force is everything. To suggest otherwise is to undermine the foundation of our order, Truth is not heresy, merely uncomfortable. Your order has built a noble philosophy on the Force's duality: light and dark, balance and imbalance, attachment and serenity. These are meaningful distinctions within the context of your existence, but they are not universal laws. In some realities, there is no Force at all, yet beings there struggle with morality, love, sacrifice, and power just as intensely as any Jedi or Sith. Yaddle's mind reeled. 8 centuries of certainty wavered. Then what is balance, if not the equilibrium between light and dark? What is the purpose of the Jedi, if the Force is merely one truth among infinite others? The One above all gestured, and the galaxy below rippled. Yaddle saw visions cascade before her, realities branching and converging. She saw a galaxy where the Jedi had never fallen, where the Republic endured for 1,000,000 years in peace. She saw a galaxy consumed by Sith, every world a charnel house of suffering. She saw a galaxy where the Force had never awakened, where beings built their civilizations on science and will alone, achieving greatness and tragedy in equal measure. Each reality was complete unto itself, each one meaningful to those who lived within it. Balance is what you make it, the being said. The Force seeks equilibrium because that is its nature, but nature can be understood and transcended. Your purpose, Grand Master, is not given to you by the Force. It is chosen by you despite the Force. This is the gift of consciousness, the true power that makes mortals magnificent. Before Yaddle could respond, a second ship tore through the reality storm surrounding Mortis. It was a Sith infiltrator, its angular hull painted in the crimson and black of the ancient Sith Empire. From its landing ramp emerged a figure Yaddle recognized immediately, a presence she had hoped never to encounter again. Darth Maleficent, a Sith Lord who had survived the purges by hiding in the unknown regions, her power tempered by centuries of solitary meditation on the dark side. The Sith Lord wore armor of black cortosis, lightsaber hilts hanging from her belt like trophies. Her face was pale, marked with ritual scars that channeled dark side energy. Yellow eyes fixed on the One above all with an expression of predatory hunger. "I felt you," Maleficent said, her voice rough from disuse. "A presence beyond the Force. Impossible, yet here you stand. What are you? A weapon? A nexus of dark side energy? Tell me, so that I might claim your power for myself." The One above all regarded her with the same gentle attention it had given Yaddle. "I am not a weapon. I am not an energy source. I am a witness to all that is, including you, Darth Maleficent. I see your pain, the wound that drives you toward domination. I see the moment you chose the dark side, believing it would give you strength to protect what you could not save." Maleficent's hand moved to her lightsaber hilt. "You see nothing. You understand nothing. The dark side is not a choice born of weakness, but of clarity. The Jedi preach balance, but they fear their own power. I embrace mine. If you exist beyond the Force, then you are either an ally or an obstacle. Choose." Yaddle stepped between them, her own lightsaber igniting with a snap hiss that echoed across the plaza. The blade hummed green, steady and sure. "This being is not here for your conquest, Sith. Whatever power it represents, it will not be corrupted by your hunger." Maleficent laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Still playing guardian, old fool? Your order is dying. The Jedi grow complacent on Coruscant while the galaxy festers with injustice. This being represents a chance to transcend the Force's limitations. I will not let you stand in the way of evolution." She moved with the speed of a Force-augmented predator, her twin lightsabers igniting mid-leap. Red plasma blades carved the air as she descended on Yaddle, each strike aimed to kill. Yaddle met the assault with the defensive precision of a Form 3 master, her single blade intercepting both of Maleficent's with minimal movement. The clash of lightsabers created bursts of light that reflected off the crystallized plaza, turning the battlefield into a kaleidoscope of color. The One above all did not intervene. It watched, its presence a steady weight at the edge of perception. Yaddle felt its attention and understood that this confrontation was part of the larger pattern, a necessary expression of the conflict that defined the galaxy. Maleficent pressed her attack, using the Juyo form's aggressive unpredictability to probe Yaddle's defense. Each strike came from an unexpected angle, each feint designed to create an opening. But Yaddle's centuries of experience had taught her to read not the blade but the intention behind it. She saw Maleficent's attacks before they manifested, felt the ripples in the force that preceded each movement. "You fight well," Yaddle said, her voice calm despite the intensity of combat. "But you fight alone. The dark side isolates, it consumes. The dark side empowers." Maleficent snarled, unleashing a wave of force lightning that arced across the plaza. Yaddle raised her free hand, absorbing the energy through the force and dissipating it harmlessly. The effort cost her, sweat beading on her green skin, but she held firm. The Sith Lord disengaged, breathing hard. She turned to the One Above All, her expression twisted with frustration. "Grant me power. Show me how to transcend the Force's limits. I will pay any price." The One Above All's response was not words but a vision that encompassed both combatants. Reality fractured around them, and suddenly they stood in a different mortis, one where the father still lived, where the son and daughter maintained their eternal balance. They witnessed the son's temptation, his fall into darkness, his attempt to escape mortis and unleash his power on the galaxy. They saw the daughter's sacrifice, the father's choice to end his own existence, to prevent catastrophe. They understood, in a moment of forced clarity, that the balance between light and dark was maintained not by power but by sacrifice. The vision released them. Maleficent staggered, her lightsabers deactivating. Yaddle lowered her blade, her expression sorrowful. "You cannot grant power," Yaddle said to the One Above All. "That is not your nature. You offer only perspective, only the terrible freedom of understanding that we are not bound by the rules we believe govern us." "Correct," the being replied. "The Force is your galaxy's framework for meaning, but frameworks can be expanded or transcended. What you do with this knowledge is yours to determine." "I compel nothing." Maleficent's face contorted with rage and despair. "Then you are useless, a god that grants nothing, a witness that changes nothing. I should destroy you for the insult of your existence." She raised her hands, channeling dark side energy in a torrent of raw hatred. The Force itself seemed to scream as she drew upon reservoirs of power she had accumulated over centuries. Lightning and flame and kinetic force converged on the One Above All, in a display that would have vaporized a lesser being. The attack passed through the One Above All like light through glass. The energy dissipated harmlessly, leaving the being untouched. It regarded Maleficent with something like pity. "You sought to harm that which cannot be harmed, to dominate that which has no form to control. This is the paradox of the dark side, Darth Maleficent. It promises power over reality, but reality is vaster than any individual will. Your strength is real, your determination formidable, but you fight against the nature of existence itself." Maleficent collapsed to her knees, exhausted and defeated not by superior force, but by the futility of her assault. Yaddle approached her slowly, lightsaber still ignited but held, low, non-threatening. "There is another path," Yaddle said gently. "The Jedi way is not the only alternative to the Sith, but it offers something you have forgotten. Community. Purpose beyond the self. The dark side has given you power, but at what cost?" The Sith Lord looked up, her yellow eyes wet with tears she refused to shed. "The cost was everything I was. I cannot go back. I will not." "Then go forward," Yaddle said. "The Force offers infinite paths. Perhaps this being's presence here is a reminder that we are not locked into the roles we have chosen. Light and dark are real, but they are not prison sentences." Maleficent's response was cut short by a new disturbance. The sky above Mortis, already strange, began to tear. Through the rents in reality, ships emerged, dozens of them, bearing the marks of a Force cult Yaddle recognized from historical records. The Disciples of Twilight, a sect that had splintered from both Jedi and Sith philosophies, believing that true power lay in the space between light and darkness. They had been thought extinct for 2 centuries, but clearly they had merely been hiding, waiting for a sign. The largest ship, a modified cruiser festooned with symbols of cosmic balance, broadcast a message across all frequencies. The voice was fervent, touched with madness. "Behold, the one beyond the Force has arrived. The prophecies of the Twilight Scrolls are fulfilled. We come to witness the end of duality, the birth of a new paradigm. All who serve the Force must bow before that which transcends it." Yaddle and Maleficent exchanged a glance, their conflict momentarily forgotten in the face of this new threat. The Disciples of Twilight had been dangerous precisely because they rejected the ethical frameworks of both Jedi and Sith, believing that power itself was the only meaningful virtue. If they sought to claim or worship the one above all, the consequences could destabilize the entire galaxy. The cult ships began landing on Mortis, disgorging hundreds of Force users clad in grey robes marked with spiraling symbols. They carried lightsabers of unusual construction, blades that flickered between colors, unable to settle on a single hue. At their head walked a woman whose presence in the Force was disorienting, neither light nor dark, but a nauseating blend of both. She called herself the Twilight Matriarch, and her power was undeniable. "One above all," she called out, her arms spread wide in supplication or demand. "We have prepared for this moment across 10 generations. Our ancestors foresaw your coming, a being that would prove the Force is not the ultimate reality. We offer ourselves as your instruments. Guide us to transcendence. Show us how to break the chains of light and darkness." The one above all regarded the assembled cultists with the same steady attention it had given everyone else. "I guide nothing. I force nothing. I am not here to lead you or to validate your beliefs. I exist, and my existence proves only that the universe is larger than you imagined. What you do with this information is your choice, not my command." The matriarch's expression hardened. "Then you deny us. You stand before us, proof that our philosophy is correct, yet you refuse to grant us the power we have earned through sacrifice and study. This is unacceptable." She turned to her followers, her voice rising to a fevered pitch. "The one beyond refuses to acknowledge us. It clings to passivity, to observation without action. But we are not passive. We are the children of Twilight, and we will claim what is ours by right. If this being will not grant power willingly, we will take it through the Force." The cultists began a ritual Yaddle recognized from forbidden texts, a technique the ancient Sith had developed to drain Force energy from living beings and redirect it. But they were not targeting a Force user. They were attempting to drain the one above all itself, to siphon its cosmic essence and redistribute it among themselves. The arrogance of the attempt was staggering, but the danger was real. Even if they could not harm the being, the ritual itself would create a vortex of unstable Force energy that could tear Mortis apart. Yaddle ignited her lightsaber and began moving toward the cultists, but Maleficent caught her arm. "Wait," the Sith Lord said. "This is beyond either of us. If we intervene directly, we will be caught in their ritual. We need a different approach." Yaddle studied her former enemy, seeing calculation but also genuine concern. "What do you propose?" "The ritual requires focus, synchronized intention across all participants. If we can break their concentration, disrupt their unity, the backlash will stop them more effectively than any direct assault." It was sound strategy, and Yaddle nodded. Together, they moved in opposite directions around the perimeter of the ritual circle. Yaddle reached out through the Force, not to attack but to soothe, to remind each cultist of their individuality, of the choices that had led them here. She projected images of their past selves, the moment before they joined the cult, the doubts they had suppressed in their quest for power. It was a subtle assault, targeting their unity rather than their bodies. Maleficent took a more aggressive approach. She channeled dark side fear through the Force, whispering to each cultist's deepest insecurities. What if the ritual failed? What if they were not worthy? What if the one above all destroyed them for their presumption? Her technique was crueler than Yaddle's, but no less effective. The ritual began to falter. Cultists broke formation, their concentration wavering. The matriarch screamed commands, trying to restore order, but the damage was done. The vortex of force energy they had created began to collapse inward, destabilizing. The one above all remained motionless at the center of the chaos, untouched by the swirling energies. When the vortex finally imploded, it released a shockwave that knocked every cultist unconscious, their bodies scattered across the plaza like discarded dolls. The matriarch alone remained standing, held upright by sheer will and hate. "You," she spat at the one above all. "You could have stopped this. You could have granted us what we sought. Instead, you let us fail. What kind of god are you?" The being's response was quiet, almost sad. "I am not a god in the sense you imagine. I do not intervene, do not reward or punish. I exist, and my existence changes you only insofar as you allow it. You sought power you had not earned through understanding. The Force does not grant such wishes, and neither do I. What you call failure is merely the natural consequence of your choices." The matriarch laughed, a broken sound. "Then damn you. Damn your existence. Damn your indifference." She raised a lightsaber to her own throat, ready to end her life rather than face the collapse of everything she believed. Yaddle moved, with impossible speed, using the Force to yank the weapon from the matriarch's hand before she could complete the act. "No, you do not escape through death. You face what you have done. You rebuild from the wreckage of your certainty. This is the harder path, but it is the only one that leads to genuine understanding." The matriarch collapsed, weeping, the fervor that had sustained her for decades finally breaking. Around her, the other cultists began to stir, their minds fractured by the ritual's failure. They would need years to recover, if they recovered at all. Yaddle felt sorrow for them, but also recognition that some lessons could only be learned through suffering. Maleficent approached the one above all, her expression unreadable. "You let them try. You watched them fail. This is your pattern, is it not? Observation without interference, even when interference might prevent suffering. Free will requires the freedom to fail," the being replied. "To intervene would be to rob them of choice, to make them puppets rather than participants in their own existence. This is the burden of consciousness. You are free to choose, and freedom includes the possibility of catastrophic error." "A cruel philosophy," Maleficent said. "An honest one," Yaddle countered. "The Force grants us power, but it does not dictate our choices. We are responsible for what we do with the gifts we are given. This being simply makes that responsibility more visible, more undeniable." The three of them stood in silence as Mortis slowly repaired itself. The crystallized plaza re-solidified, the tears in the sky sealed. The realm existed outside normal causality, able to heal from wounds that would be permanent elsewhere. But the wounds in the Force, the disturbances caused by the ritual and the one above all's presence, would take longer to fade. As the wounded cultists were secured and their ships quarantined, more vessels began arriving at Mortis. Word of the one above all's appearance had spread through the Force like wildfire across dry grasslands. Jedi came seeking wisdom, Sith came seeking power or confirmation of their philosophies, scholars came seeking knowledge. Even ordinary spacers, those with only the faintest whisper of Force sensitivity, felt compelled to witness this impossible being. Yaddle found herself acting as an unexpected mediator, trying to maintain order in a realm that had never been designed for crowds. She established boundaries around the central plaza, designated landing zones for incoming ships, and arranged audiences with the one above all for those whose needs seemed most genuine. It was exhausting work, made more difficult by the reality that she was operating without any formal authority on Mortis. Maleficent, surprisingly, assisted her. The Sith Lord's motivations were unclear, perhaps simple pragmatism, perhaps something more complex stirring beneath her dark side exterior. She used her intimidating presence to discourage those who came with violent intent, and her centuries of experience to identify those whose questions deserved consideration. One of the early arrivals was a young Jedi Knight named Tal, barely 30 years old, his connection to the Force strong but turbulent. He had come seeking answers about his place in the Order, about whether the strict dogmas of the Jedi truly served the galaxy or merely perpetuated an ancient institution's survival. The One Above All granted him audience. Tal knelt before the being, his voice trembling. "Master, I have served the Jedi faithfully, but I see suffering everywhere. Children enslaved on Tatooine. Corporations crushing entire species for profit on the Outer Rim. Corruption rotting the Republic from within. The Jedi speak of balance, but we maintain the status quo. We preserve a broken system. Is this truly the will of the Force, or have we become complicit in injustice?" The being's response was measured. The Force wills nothing. It flows, it connects, it reveals consequences, but it does not command. The Jedi Order has made choices about how to serve the galaxy. Those choices have prevented some suffering and perpetuated other suffering. This is the nature of finite beings wielding power in an infinite cosmos. You feel the weight of complicity because you are awake to it. This awareness is a gift and a burden. "Then what should I do?" Tal asked. "How can I serve the light when the structures meant to embody it seem so compromised?" "You choose," the One Above All said simply. "You can work within the Order to reform it. You can leave the Order and serve the galaxy in your own way. You can accept the limitations of institutional power and find meaning in small acts of compassion. Each path has costs. Each path has value. The question is not which path is right, but which path you can walk with integrity." Tal left the audience deep in thought, his certainty shaken but his purpose clarified. Over the following days, he would meditate on the being's words, eventually choosing to remain with the Jedi but to advocate loudly for reform, becoming a voice of conscience within the Order. Others came with different questions. A Sith apprentice named Vex, barely 20, asked why the dark side promised power yet delivered only isolation. A Mandalorian warrior asked whether honor and violence could ever truly coexist. A Twi'lek slave who had somehow escaped her masters and made her way to Mortis asked if freedom was real or merely another form of bondage to choice. The One Above All answered each with the same patient attention, never prescribing solutions, but offering perspectives that forced the questioners to confront their own assumptions. Some left satisfied, others left angry, feeling cheated by answers that required them to think rather than obey. Still, others left transformed, carrying seeds of understanding that would grow slowly over years. Among those who arrived was a contingent from the Jedi Council itself. Master Mace Windu led them, his purple lightsaber a symbol of his unique position between the Order's extremes. With him came Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, and Shak-Ti, 4 of the Council's most respected voices. Yaddle met them at the landing platform, relief flooding through her. "Masters, I did not expect the Council to come in person." Windu's expression was grave. "The implications of this being's presence are too significant to ignore, Grand Master. We must assess whether it represents a threat to the Order or an opportunity for growth. Your reports have been illuminating but insufficient." They gathered in the central plaza, the 4 council members standing before the One Above All while Yaddle observed. The being regarded them with its usual equanimity, waiting for them to speak. Windu spoke first, his voice formal. "I am Mace Windu of the Jedi High Council. We come seeking clarification. You claim to exist beyond the Force. You present yourself as a witness rather than a participant. Yet your very presence disrupts the balance we are sworn to maintain. Ships flock here. Force users abandon their duties to seek you out. The galaxy grows unstable. What is your purpose? When will you depart?" The One Above All considered the questions. "My purpose is my nature. I witness. I exist. As for departure, I will leave when the lesson has been learned, or when it becomes clear the lesson cannot be learned. The instability you describe is not caused by my presence, but by your galaxy's confrontation with the limits of its own understanding. I am merely the mirror that reflects what was always true. And what truth is that? Ki-Adi-Mundi asked, his tall form rigid with tension. That the Force, for all its magnificence, is not absolute. That your philosophies, while meaningful within their context, do not encompass all possible approaches to existence. That certainty is a trap and mystery is liberation. These truths are uncomfortable, especially for an institution built on thousands of years of accumulated certainty. Plo Koon stepped forward, his masked face unreadable. We do not claim to know everything. The Jedi acknowledge the Force's mysteries. We pursue wisdom precisely because we recognize our limitations. Do you? The being asked gently. Or do you pursue wisdom within boundaries you dare not question? When was the last time the Jedi Council considered that the Force itself might not be the ultimate framework for understanding morality? When did you last question whether the distinction between light and dark, while real and meaningful, might also be provisional rather than eternal? The Council members exchanged glances. Shakti spoke, her voice thoughtful. You suggest our entire philosophy is built on questionable foundations. Yet the Jedi have served the galaxy for millennia. We have prevented wars, protected the innocent, maintained peace. Are you saying all of that was misguided? Not misguided, incomplete. Your service has been genuine and valuable within the context of this galaxy's reality. But service born from certainty differs from service born from humility. The former becomes rigid, unable to adapt when circumstances change. The latter remains flexible, able to grow and evolve. I offer you the gift of humility, the recognition that your understanding, however deep, is not total. Mace Windu's jaw tightened. And if we reject this gift? If we determine that the Jedi Order's preservation requires us to maintain our certainty about the Force's primacy, then you reject it. The One above all said simply, I compel nothing. I threaten nothing. If you choose to insulate yourselves from the implications of my existence, that is your right. But understand the cost. To choose certainty in the face of evidence for mystery is to choose stagnation. Your order will survive, perhaps, but it will not grow. And in a changing galaxy, that which cannot grow eventually ossifies. The conversation continued for hours, the council members probing and questioning, seeking to understand this being that defied every category their training had prepared them for. Yaddle watched, seeing her fellow masters struggle with the same disorientation she had experienced during her first encounter. Some, like Plo Koon and Shakti, seemed open to reconsidering their assumptions. Others, like Windu and Ki-Adi-Mundi, remained skeptical, seeing danger in any philosophy that questioned the Force's ultimacy. Eventually, the council members withdrew to confer privately. Yaddle joined them, expecting debate, but found instead a heavy silence. Finally, Windu spoke. This being poses a crisis of faith. Not in the Force itself, but in our understanding of the Force. If we accept its claims, we must fundamentally restructure the Jedi's relationship to the galaxy. If we reject its claims, we risk appearing dogmatic, closed to truth that challenges our comfort. Perhaps that is precisely the point, Yaddle said, quietly. Perhaps the crisis is the lesson. We have grown comfortable in our certainty, confident that we understand the Force's will. This being reminds us that confidence can become arrogance, that certainty can become blindness. Or, Ki-Adi-Mundi countered, this being is a test of our faith. The dark side has always worked through doubt, through questioning, through the erosion of commitment to the light. What if this entire encounter is designed to weaken the Jedi at a moment when the galaxy needs us most? Shakti shook her head. That interpretation requires us to believe this being is malevolent, seeking to deceive us. Yet I feel no deception in its presence, no malice. Only observation, patient and neutral. Neutrality itself can be a form of cruelty, Plo Koon observed. To watch suffering without intervening, to offer questions rather than answers, this could be seen as indifference rather than wisdom. The debate continued, circling the same fundamental question. Was the one above all a threat or an opportunity? A deceiver or a truth-teller? A crisis or a catalyst? While the Jedi deliberated, events elsewhere in the galaxy were accelerating. On Korriban, the ancient Sith homeworld, a conclave of dark side practitioners had convened. Unlike the Twilight cult, these were not fanatics but calculating philosophers of power. They saw in the one above all's appearance a chance to settle ancient debates about the nature of the dark side. Leading the conclave was Darth Profundis, a Sith Lord who had spent centuries studying the metaphysical foundations of the Force. She had developed theories that the dark side was not merely a corruption of the Force, but a fundamental aspect of reality itself, as necessary as entropy in thermodynamics. The one above all's existence, she believed, could prove or disprove her theories. Profundis was ancient, older even than Yaddle, her body preserved through Sith alchemy and an iron will. She gathered her fellows, 12 Sith Lords representing different traditions within the dark side philosophy, and proposed an expedition to Mortis. If this being exists beyond the Force, she told them, then it can answer the question that has haunted the Sith since Bane instituted the rule of two. Is the dark side a path to transcendence, or is it merely a different flavor of the same cosmic limitation? If the Force itself is not ultimate, then perhaps our pursuit of power through the dark side has been a category error, seeking supremacy within a system that is itself subordinate. The implications were staggering. Some Sith Lords saw opportunity, others saw heresy. The debate grew heated, lightsabers were drawn, and before the conclave could reach consensus, 3 of the Sith Lords lay dead, victims of philosophical disagreements resolved through violence. The survivors agreed to journey to Mortis, each for their own reasons. Profundis sought knowledge, others sought to test their power against a being that supposedly transcended the Force. Still others hoped to destroy the one above all, seeing it as a threat to the Sith's ideological foundations. Their arrival at Mortis was marked by darkness. 9 Sith vessels emerged from hyperspace simultaneously, their presence in the Force like a stain spreading across clean water. Yaddle felt them coming and moved to intercept, but the one above all raised a hand. Let them come, the being said. They too deserve answers, however uncomfortable those answers may be. The Sith Lords disembarked with theatrical menace, their robes billowing in wind that should not exist on Mortis. Profundis led them, her ancient face, a roadmap of cruelty and intelligence. She bowed mockingly to the one above all. Great witness, she said, her voice dripping with irony. We, the practitioners of the dark side, come seeking illumination. Tell us, is our pursuit of power through passion and domination a valid path to transcendence? Or are we, as the Jedi claim, merely corrupted fools dancing in the shadows of true understanding? The one above all regarded her steadily. You seek validation for choices already made. You want me to tell you that your suffering, your cruelty, your domination of others serves some higher purpose. I cannot give you that comfort. Then what can you give us? Asked another Sith Lord, his face hidden behind a mask of polished bone. Perspective. The dark side is real. It is a genuine aspect of the Force, drawing on passion, fear, anger, and the will to dominate. It grants power, just as you believe. But power for what purpose? You speak of transcendence, yet what you practice is merely control. You seek to bend reality to your will, but reality is vaster than any will, however strong. Your philosophy is coherent within its own terms, but those terms are narrower than you imagine. Profundis smiled, a terrible expression. So we are fools, then. Our centuries of study, our sacrifices, our achievements, all reducible to the delusions of beings who failed to see beyond the Force's boundaries. Not fools, limited. As all beings are limited, the difference between wisdom and folly lies not in transcending limitation but in acknowledging it. The Jedi suffer from their own form of limitation, believing their light is sufficient to illuminate all darkness. You suffer from believing your darkness can extinguish all light. Both are wrong. Both are right within certain contexts. Neither is ultimate. One of the younger Sith Lords, a Zabrak with ritual tattoos covering his face, ignited his lightsaber. Enough philosophy. I did not come here for lessons. I came to test whether this being can be killed. If it exists beyond the Force, then perhaps it can be dominated by one strong enough to transcend the Force's limits. He attacked with savage speed, his crimson blade singing through the air. The one above all did not move. The lightsaber passed through it as though through smoke, inflicting no damage, meeting no resistance. The Zabrak stumbled, off balance, and in his confusion, several other Sith Lords joined the assault. 9 lightsabers struck from different angles, complemented by force lightning, telekinetic crushes, and even a Sith scream that should have shattered stone. The one above all remained untouched, standing calmly at the center of a storm of violence. Profundis did not participate in the attack. She watched, her ancient eyes calculating. When the assault finally exhausted itself, leaving the attackers gasping and furious, she spoke. You cannot be harmed by the Force. You cannot be manipulated by it. This suggests you exist in a relationship to the Force that renders its power meaningless against you. Tell me, could you, if you chose, harm us? Do you possess power, or merely invulnerability? The one above all's response was careful. I could end your existence with a thought. Not through power, but through withdrawal of the consent that allows you to exist, within my awareness. But such an action would violate the principles of free will and consequence that govern my relationship to created reality. You are free to attack me eternally, and I will remain unharmed. You are free to learn from this experience, or to learn nothing. The choice, as always, is yours. A pacifist god, one Sith Lord sneered. How disappointing. Not a pacifist, a witness. Violence is a choice with consequences. I do not prevent your choices, but neither do I shield you from their results. If you continue to attack, you will continue to fail, and that failure will teach you something about the limits of force as a solution to existential questions. Profundis finally stepped forward, waving her hand to dismiss the other Sith Lords. Enough. We came for answers, not to embarrass ourselves with futile violence. You have shown us that we are not supreme, that our power, however great, operates within boundaries we cannot transcend. This is valuable knowledge, though bitter to swallow. She turned to face the other Sith, her voice sharp with command. We return to Korriban. There is much to debate, much to reconsider. Perhaps the rule of 2 must evolve. Perhaps our understanding of the dark side requires refinement. Or perhaps we simply continue as we have, accepting that our pursuit of power, while not ultimate, remains meaningful within the galaxy we inhabit. The Sith Lords departed, some reluctant, others relieved, all shaken by the encounter. Only Darth Maleficent remained, having observed the entire exchange from the plaza's periphery. She approached Profundis before the ancient Sith Lord could board her ship. You accept this too easily, Profundis. This being challenges everything the Sith have built. How can you simply walk away? Profundis regarded her with eyes that had seen centuries. Because I am old enough to recognize when I am outmatched. This being cannot be dominated, cannot be destroyed, cannot even be comprehended through the frameworks we have developed. Fighting it is meaningless. But learning from it, taking what knowledge it offers, and incorporating that knowledge into our philosophy, that is the Sith way. We adapt or we perish. I choose adaptation. Adaptation or surrender? Maleficent challenged. Is there a difference? Profundis smiled. The Sith have always been pragmatists beneath the rhetoric. Power for power's sake is hollow. Power in service of survival and evolution, that has meaning. This being has taught me that the galaxy is larger than our ambitions. Very well. I will adjust my ambitions accordingly. She departed, leaving Maleficent alone with her thoughts. The younger Sith Lord turned back to the one above all, her expression tormented. "Why did you come here?" she demanded. "What purpose does it serve to shatter everyone's certainties, to show us that our deepest convictions are built on foundations of sand?" The being's response was gentle. "Sand can be beautiful. Certainty, however illusory, can provide structure for meaningful lives. I did not come to shatter anything. I came because the fabric between realities thinned, and my nature is to witness where witnessing becomes possible. The shattering you describe is not my doing, but your response to evidence that contradicts comfortable beliefs. This discomfort, this crisis, this is the price of growth." "And if I do not want to grow?" Maleficent asked. "If I prefer my comfortable hatred, my certain knowledge that the strong deserve to rule and the weak deserve to suffer, then you do not grow. You crystallize into the shape you have chosen. This too is a valid choice, though it carries costs. Stagnation leads eventually to irrelevance, but irrelevance is sometimes preferable to the agony of transformation. I do not judge your choice. I merely observe its consequences." Maleficent stood in silence for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, almost lost. "I am afraid. For the first time in centuries, I am genuinely afraid. Not of death or defeat, but of meaninglessness. If the dark side is not ultimate, if my power is merely power within a limited context, then what have I sacrificed everything to achieve?" Yaddle, who had been listening from nearby, approached slowly. "You have achieved what you chose to achieve. That choice was real, even if the framework you understood it through was incomplete. You can choose differently now. Not to become a Jedi, perhaps that bridge is too far, but to become something other than what you have been. The Force offers infinite paths. Your past does not imprison you unless you allow it to." The two women stood together, Jedi and Sith, united briefly in their shared confrontation with uncertainty. The moment passed. Maleficent turned away, boarding her ship without another word. But Yaddle saw something in her former enemy's posture, a slight softening, a loosening of the rigid certainty that had defined her for so long. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was the beginning of transformation. Time would tell. As weeks passed, Mortis became a pilgrimage site unlike any in galactic history. Ships arrived daily, bearing Force users and Force-blind alike, all seeking audience with the one above all. Yaddle and a rotating contingent of Jedi volunteers struggled to maintain order, processing requests, mediating disputes, and protecting the realm from those who would seek to weaponize or worship the being. Among the visitors were representatives from worlds that had never before engaged with Force-using orders. A delegation from the Chiss Ascendancy arrived, their Force sensitives operating under completely different philosophical frameworks than either Jedi or Sith. They engaged the one above all in long discussions about the nature of precognition and whether seeing the future invalidated free will. A group of Dathomirian Night Sisters came, practicing a tradition that blended Force use with ancient magics. They asked whether their understanding of spirits and possession was compatible with the broader understanding of the Force. The one above all's answer, characteristically, was that compatibility was less important than effectiveness. If their practices brought meaning and did not cause disproportionate harm, then they were valid within their context. Even representatives from the Republic Senate arrived, non-Force sensitive politicians seeking to understand what this phenomenon meant for galactic stability. They met with Yaddle rather than the one above all directly, recognizing that their concerns were practical rather than philosophical. Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan spoke for the delegation. "Grand Master, the Senate is concerned. We have reports of Jedi abandoning their posts to journey here. Planets requesting Jedi peacekeepers are being told that available knights are insufficient. The Order's credibility is being tested by this extended distraction. When will you return to Coruscant? When will this situation resolve itself?" Yaddle considered her response carefully. "Senator, the Jedi Order is experiencing a moment of profound introspection. This is necessary and healthy, though I understand it creates short-term challenges for the Republic. The situation will resolve when those who need to understand have had the opportunity to learn. I cannot provide a more specific timeline than that." Organa frowned. "With respect, Grandmaster, the galaxy does not operate on the Force's timeline. There are conflicts brewing, trade disputes escalating, border skirmishes threatening to become wars. The Jedi are needed now, not whenever this philosophical crisis concludes." "The Jedi will return," Yaddle assured him. "But we will return changed, more humble, more aware of our limitations. In the long term, I believe this will make us more effective servants of peace, not less." The senator departed unsatisfied, and Yaddle could not blame him. From his perspective, the Rizashan Jedi were indulging in navel-gazing while the galaxy burned. From her perspective, the Jedi were confronting the foundational assumptions that had governed their order for millennia. Both perspectives were valid. Both mattered. The tension between them would have to be navigated carefully. Among the younger Jedi who had made the pilgrimage to Mortis was a Padawan named Rael, barely 16, gifted with precognition beyond his years. He had seen visions of the One Above All before its arrival, dreams that had terrified and fascinated him in equal measure. When he finally stood before the being, his question was simple and devastating. "Am I real? Or am I just a character in a story you're observing? If you exist beyond the Force, beyond our reality, then does our existence have meaning, or are we merely entertainment?" The One Above All knelt to meet the young Padawan's eyes, a gesture that somehow conveyed both infinite power and infinite gentleness. "You are as real as anything can be real. Your experiences, your choices, your suffering and joy, these are genuine within the context of your existence. Yes, I observe you from a perspective you cannot fully comprehend, but observation does not negate reality. You matter because you experience mattering. That experience is not diminished by the fact that I witness it." "But you could end our entire galaxy with a thought," Rael said, tears streaming down his face. "You said so yourself. If we exist only because you consent to our existence, then we're not truly free. We're puppets dancing on strings we cannot see." "No," the being said firmly. "You misunderstand. I do not maintain your existence through active effort. You exist because existence itself is generative, constantly bringing forth new possibilities. I witness, but I do not sustain. If I withdrew my attention entirely, your galaxy would continue exactly as it is. You are not dependent on me, you are simply visible to me." The distinction seemed to comfort the young Padawan somewhat. He stepped back, still troubled, but less despairing. Watching this exchange, Yaddle felt a deep weariness settle into her bones. She had been on Mortis for nearly 2 months, managing an endless stream of seekers, mediating conflicts, attempting to distill wisdom from an experience that defied simple categorization. She needed rest, needed time to process everything she had witnessed, needed to return to Coruscant and report to the full council. She approached the One Above All during a rare, quiet moment. "I must return to my duties. The Order needs guidance, and I can provide that more effectively from Coruscant than from here. Will you be well without a Jedi presence to manage the visitors?" The being smiled. "I require no management, Grandmaster. The visitors will continue to come, or they will not. Those who need answers will find them, or they will not. Your stewardship has been valuable for those you helped, but I am not the one who needed it." Yaddle bowed. "Then I take my leave, with gratitude for the perspective you have provided. I do not know if I will return, but I will carry what I have learned here for the rest of my days." "That is enough," the One Above All said. "That is always enough." Yaddle departed Mortis as she had arrived, alone in her small ship, carrying a weight of knowledge that seemed heavier than any physical burden. As she entered hyperspace, she looked back one final time at the celestial realm, wondering how long the One Above All would remain before moving on to whatever incomprehensible purpose guided beings of such nature. Her return to Coruscant was marked by immediate summons to the council chamber. All 12 members were present, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Master Yoda gestured for her to take her customary seat. "Much to discuss, we have," the ancient master said. "Your extended absence, concerning it has been. Your reports, troubling they were. Speak now, Grand Master. Yaddle, tell us plainly, a threat is this being, or not?" Yaddle gathered her thoughts. "It is not a threat in the conventional sense. It seeks to harm no one, to conquer nothing, to upset no political order. But it is a challenge, perhaps the greatest challenge the Jedi Order has faced in millennia. It challenges our assumption that the Force is ultimate, that our understanding of light and dark encompasses all meaningful moral distinctions. Accepting this challenge requires humility that some of us may not possess." Mace Windu spoke next. "I have read your reports carefully, Grand Master. I have meditated on the implications. I believe this being, whether intentionally or not, poses an existential threat to the Jedi Order. If we accept that the Force is not ultimate, we undermine the very foundation of our authority. Why should the galaxy trust us as guardians of peace if we ourselves are uncertain about the source of our power? Because honesty is more trustworthy than false certainty," Yaddle replied. "The galaxy deserves Jedi who acknowledge their limitations, not Jedi who pretend to infallibility. The galaxy deserves Jedi who can act decisively in moments of crisis," Ki-Adi-Mundi countered. "Doubt is paralyzing. If we spend all our time questioning our foundations, we will be ineffective when action is required." Shakti raised a hand for attention. "Perhaps we are approaching this incorrectly. The One Above All has not asked us to abandon the Force or our service to it. It has simply asked us to hold our convictions more lightly, to recognize that our truth is not the only truth. This seems compatible with the Jedi way. We have always sought wisdom, and wisdom includes recognizing what we do not know." The debate continued for hours, the council deeply divided. Some members, like Yoda, Shakti, and Plo Koon, were sympathetic to Yaddle's position. Others, like Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and several of the more conservative masters, saw danger in any philosophy that questioned the Force's primacy. Finally, Master Yoda called for silence. "Agree on everything, we need not. But act, we must. Propose this, I do. Send to Mortis, we will, a rotating contingent of Jedi, young and old, dogmatic and flexible, all traditions represented. Let them encounter this being, let them return with their own understanding. From many perspectives, wisdom emerges. Force this upon anyone, we will not, but opportunity to learn, we must provide." The proposal was put to a vote. It passed, barely, with 6 masters in favor and 6 opposed. As the senior Grand Master, Yoda's vote served as tiebreaker. In the months that followed, Jedi from across the galaxy made pilgrimages to Mortis. Some returned transformed, their understanding of the Force deepened and complicated. Others returned unchanged, convinced that the One Above All was a test of faith they had passed by refusing to doubt. Still others returned broken, unable to reconcile what they had witnessed with what they had been taught. The Order entered a period of profound ferment. Debates about the nature of the Force, previously settled by reference to ancient texts, were reopened. Factions formed, not along lines of light versus dark, but along questions of certainty versus humility, tradition versus adaptation. Yaddle watched these developments with mixed feelings. On one hand, the Order was grappling with important questions that had been suppressed for too long. On the other hand, the conflict was painful, dividing teachers from students, friends from friends, sometimes even masters from their former Padawans. One afternoon, Yaddle was approached by a younger Jedi, a human woman named Lyra who had recently returned from Mortis. Lyra's eyes were haunted. "Grand Master," she said quietly, "I need to confess something. After speaking with the One Above All, I no longer feel connected to the Force as I once did. It is still there. I can still touch it, but it feels, I do not know how to say this, less alive." less like a living presence and more like a tool or a resource. Is this a sign that I have fallen somehow? Yaddle guided the young Jedi to a quiet meditation chamber. Tell me, what did the One Above All say to you? It showed me a vision of a galaxy without the Force. Beings there lived and loved and suffered and died without any connection to the energy field we believe binds everything together, and they were not less human for it, they were not less meaningful. They struggled with the same moral questions we do, they made sacrifices, they built civilizations. And I realized that the Force, for all its magnificence, is not necessary for meaning. It is one path among many. That realization has severed something in me. The reverential awe I felt toward the Force is gone. Yaddle considered this carefully. Perhaps what is severed is not your connection to the Force, but your worship of it. The Force is real, Lyra. It binds the galaxy together. It grants us power and insight. It shapes our lives. But it is not a god. It is not a master to be obeyed without question. Perhaps what you are experiencing is maturity, the transition from seeing the Force as a parent figure to seeing it as a partner in your journey. This transition is painful, but it is also necessary for genuine wisdom. Lyra looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. So I am not fallen. I am not losing my path. You are finding a different path, one that requires you to take more responsibility for your choices rather than attributing them to the Force's will. This is harder, lonelier, but ultimately more authentic. I cannot tell you whether to embrace this new understanding or to return to your previous relationship with the Force. That choice is yours. Similar conversations played out across the temple as Jedi grappled with the implications of the One Above All's presence. Some found the new perspectives liberating, others found them terrifying. The Order began to slowly, painfully transform. Meanwhile, in the broader galaxy, the effects rippled outward. The Sith, always prone to internal conflict, fractured further. Some accepted Profundus's pragmatic approach, others saw it as weakness and redoubled their commitment to absolute power. Small wars broke out in the unknown regions as different Sith factions fought for ideological supremacy. Force cults proliferated, some worshipping the One Above All as a new deity, others declaring it a demon sent to test the faithful. The disciples of Twilight, though broken by their failed ritual, inspired imitators who sought to walk the path between light and dark, often with disastrous results. The One Above All remained on Mortis, a patient presence at the center of the storm it had inadvertently created. Beings continued to come, continued to ask their questions, continued to leave changed or unchanged according to their nature. Among the later arrivals was a figure few expected. Darth Maleficent returned, but not as a Sith Lord seeking power. She came as a student, humble and uncertain, asking not for answers, but for guidance in asking better questions. The One Above All welcomed her. You have changed, Darth Maleficent. Or should I call you by your birth name, Ceres? The Sith Lord, or former Sith Lord, flinched at the sound of the name she had abandoned centuries ago. Ceres died when I chose the dark side. Maleficent was who I became. Names are choices, the being observed. You can make new choices. Can I? Ceres asked, using her birth name hesitantly, as though testing its fit. I have done terrible things. I have killed, tortured, enslaved. The dark side has shaped me down to my cells. The corruption is not just philosophical, it is biological. How does one come back from that? Slowly, the One Above All said. With difficulty, with backsliding and doubt and pain. Redemption is not an event but a process, one that may never be complete. But incompleteness is not failure. Progress is sufficient, effort is sufficient. The willingness to try is sufficient. Ceres sat down heavily, as though the weight she had carried for centuries suddenly became too much to bear. I do not know who I am without hatred, without the drive to dominate, without the certainty that power justifies everything. If I am not Darth Maleficent, then who am I? That, the being said gently, is the question you must answer for yourself. I can tell you that you are more than your worst actions, more than your darkest moments, more than the role you chose when you were young and wounded. But knowing this intellectually differs from feeling it in your bones. That journey is yours to walk. Cerys remained on Mortis for weeks, not seeking audiences or engaging in grand debates, simply sitting in meditation, wrestling with 800 years of accumulated darkness. Yaddle, on one of her return visits to deliver a fresh rotation of Jedi Guardians, found the former Sith Lord and sat beside her. "You are brave," Yaddle said simply. Cerys laughed bitterly. Bravery would have been refusing the dark side in the first place. This is merely desperation. I am too old and too tired to continue as I was. Bravery takes many forms. Starting over after a lifetime of mistakes, that is perhaps the greatest bravery of all. They sat together in silence, two ancient beings who had walked opposite paths, finding common ground in their shared exhaustion and shared hope. As the first anniversary of the One Above All's arrival approached, the being began to withdraw its presence gradually. The process was so subtle that most did not notice at first. Visitors would arrive and find the plaza empty, the being having relocated to some other part of Mortis. Then it would appear less frequently, its form less solid, its voice quieter. Yaddle felt the change and returned to Mortis one final time. She found the One Above All standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking an impossible vista, layers of reality visible like strata in ancient stone. "You are leaving," Yaddle said, "not a question." "My time here is ending," the being confirmed. "The lesson has been offered. Whether it was learned or not, whether it brings wisdom or merely more confusion, that is for your galaxy to determine. I do not belong here permanently. My presence was always meant to be temporary, a reminder rather than a revelation. Will you return? Perhaps. In 1,000 years or 1,000,000, when the boundaries between realities thin again. Or perhaps never. Time is different for beings like me. Your entire galactic history may be a single moment from my perspective, or it may be an eternity. The distinction is not meaningful." Yaddle felt tears on her face, though she could not articulate precisely why. Loss, certainly, gratitude, deeply felt. But also something else, a recognition that some encounters transform us in ways we cannot fully understand at the time they occur. "Thank you," she said simply, "for showing us that we are smaller than we believed, yet no less meaningful for our smallness." The One Above All turned to face her fully, and for a moment, Yaddle saw beyond the form it had worn, glimpsed the incomprehensible vastness that lay beneath. The sight should have driven her mad, but instead she felt only peace. "You were ready for this lesson," the being said. "Not everyone was, but you were. Carry it forward, Grand Master. Let it inform how the Jedi serve the galaxy. Hold your truth with conviction, but not with arrogance. Love the Force, but do not worship it. Serve the light, but recognize that light is defined by its relationship to darkness. And neither is ultimate. These paradoxes are not contradictions, but the very substance of wisdom." "I will try," Yaddle promised, "though I may fail. Failure is guaranteed," the One Above All said with something like affection. "You are finite beings in an infinite cosmos. Failure is woven into your existence. But so is the capacity to learn from failure, to grow, to become more than you were. That capacity is sacred. Honor it." And then it was gone. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, simply an absence where presence had been. Yaddle stood alone on the cliff for a long time, letting the reality of departure settle into her understanding. When she finally returned to her ship and departed Mortis, she looked back at the celestial realm and saw that it too was changing. The impossible architecture was simplifying, the layers of reality becoming less visible. Mortis was returning to its nature as a place of mystery rather than revelation, as a question rather than an answer. On Coruscant, life continued. The Jedi Order, shaken but not broken, began to integrate the lessons of the One Above All's visit. It was a slow process, marked by setbacks and resistance, But gradually a new philosophy emerged. The Jedi began to speak less of absolutes and more of context, less of the Force's will and more of their own responsibility to interpret the Force's currents wisely. Some Jedi could not accept the new uncertainty and left the Order. They were allowed to depart with honor, recognized as beings whose path required more certainty than the Reformed Order could provide. Others joined, drawn by a Jedi philosophy that seemed more honest about its limitations and therefore more trustworthy. The Sith underwent their own transformation. The pragmatic faction led by Profundis eventually dominated, not through superior force but through superior adaptability. They developed a new understanding of the dark side, seeing it not as a path to absolute power but as a tool for those willing to accept its costs. It was a more mature Sith philosophy, still dangerous but less apocalyptic. Ceres, the former Darth Maleficent, never fully left the dark side behind, but she stopped serving it as a master and began using it as one tool among many. She became neither Jedi nor Sith but something else, a grey wanderer who used her power to protect those the galaxy forgot. It was a small redemption, imperfect and incomplete, but it was hers. Decades passed. Yaddle continued to serve as Grand Master until her natural death at the age of 907, one of the longest-lived Jedi in recorded history. Her final words, spoken to a circle of her former Padawans, were simple: "The unknown endures. That is both the terror and the joy of existence. Embrace it." Centuries later, the story of the One Above All's visit had become legend, then myth, then nearly forgotten except as a parable told to young Jedi learning about humility. The lesson endured even as the specific details faded, woven into the Order's teachings as a reminder that certainty was dangerous and mystery was sacred. A young Padawan named Kira stood in the archives, reading an ancient account of the One Above All's appearance. The text was fragmentary, corrupted by time and multiple translations, but enough remained to convey the core story. She was fascinated, wondering whether the being had been real or merely an allegory created by past Jedi to teach a lesson. Her master, an elderly Twi'lek named Voss, found her there. "Ah, reading about the one beyond. Every generation rediscovers that story. What do you make of it, Padawan?" Kira considered carefully. "I am not sure if it matters whether the being was real. The lesson is real. We are not the center of the cosmos. The Force is not everything. Our understanding is always incomplete. These truths hold whether they were revealed by an actual transcendent entity or simply realized through philosophical inquiry." Voss smiled. "You understand. That is good. Too many focus on whether the One Above All existed rather than on what its existence, or the story of its existence, means for how we serve the galaxy." "Do you think it was real?" Kira asked. The old master was silent for a long moment. "I think reality is more complex than our categories allow. I think something happened centuries ago that forced the Jedi to confront their limitations. Whether that something was a being from beyond the Force or a collective spiritual crisis dressed in metaphor, it transformed the Order. That transformation was real and beneficial and worth honoring. The rest is detail." Kira accepted this answer, though she suspected she would spend years pondering the question. Such was the way of the Jedi, to grapple with mysteries that had no final resolution, to find meaning in the process of seeking rather than in the certainty of answers. On Mortis, now rarely visited except by the most dedicated scholars, a monument still stood. The simple circle of polished stone inscribed with "The unknown endures" had weathered centuries, its message as clear as the day it was carved. Occasionally, a Force-sensitive being would find their way to the celestial realm, would stand before the monument and feel an echo of the Chrysity presence that had once stood there. That echo carried no specific message, offered no particular wisdom. It was simply a reminder that the cosmos was vaster than imagination, that understanding was always provisional, that certainty was a beautiful illusion, and mystery was the bedrock of existence. And somewhere, In a space beyond space, in a time outside time, the One above all continued its eternal observation. It watched galaxies form and collapse, watched civilizations rise and fall, watched beings make the same mistakes and discoveries across infinite iterations of reality. It did not intervene. It did not judge. It simply witnessed, holding all of existence in an awareness so vast that the entirety of the Star Wars galaxy, with all its drama and significance, was but one thread in an infinite tapestry. The thread mattered. Every thread mattered. But none were ultimate. None were final. All were provisional expressions of the eternal creativity of existence, beautiful precisely because they were finite, meaningful precisely because they would end. The galaxy turned, wars came and went. Jedi and Sith continued their ancient dance, sometimes approaching synthesis, sometimes diverging toward extremes. Ordinary beings lived their lives, most never knowing about the One above all, yet all benefiting indirectly from the humility its visit had instilled in those who guided the galaxy's destiny. And in that turning, that endless cycle of light and darkness, hope and despair, certainty and doubt, the lesson endured, not as dogma, but as whisper, not as command, but as invitation. The unknown endures. Embrace it. Find meaning not in having all answers, but in asking better questions. Serve the light without claiming to embody it. Honor the Force without worshipping it. Recognize your limitations without being paralyzed by them. This is wisdom. This is the path. This is the gift the One above all left behind, not as a rule to follow, but as a possibility to explore. The stars continued their ancient dance, and in their turning, they sang a song of infinite mystery and finite meaning, of cosmic vastness and intimate significance, of eternal questions and provisional answers. It was a song without end, without resolution, without final cadence. And it was enough. It would always be enough.